everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, or living life, or loving life. Coming at you tonight, the exception, part one, the entire civil service, establishing a diplomatic course. Diplomatic course, the spreading of knowledge, the age where you get your diploma from high school and have been given knowledge to go out upon the world and spread that, show people your talents. And before we get into it, I want to remind everybody, please hit that like, share, and subscribe button. There's a PayPal link down there for anybody that wants to share some love. Every little bit is appreciated. And of course, the panel link is down there for anybody that wants to join the panel. So, the way this system works in these modern days, in my opinion, seems to be very fascist. So before we get into the entire civil service, I want to go over a couple things in regards to this modern day and how it developed. Much like the Hitler's willing executioners, okay. And when it comes to Hitler's willing executioners, long before that, something else was being established. Oops, wrong one. This is the one I want for now. So what we have before us is this day in history, June 7th. Some very important things happened. In 1929, well, I guess that's February 11th. I meant to pull up just June 11th, but this pulled up February 11th, but it relates to the fascist stuff because we're talking about the Lateran Treaty, which was ratified, and that was signed February 11th, 1929 by Benito Mussolini, a fascist, for Italy, and by Pietro Gasparri, Cardinal Secretary of State for the papacy, and ratified this day in 1929. Vatican City became a sovereign state. Okay? But before that happened, John II of Portugal, he was King of Portugal from 1481 to 1495. Okay? And he was involved in the Treaty of Tordesillas. June 7th, 1495, or excuse me, 1494, another treaty. And notice it's done the similar way. And what happens is in the Treaty of Tordesillas, it was an agreement between Spain and Portugal, King John of Portugal, John II of Portugal, aimed at settling conflicts over lands newly discovered or explored by Christopher Columbus in other late 15th century voyages. The newly discovered lands newly discovered comes under the Doctrine of Discovery of 1493. Doctrine of Discovery, 1493. In 1493, after reports of Columbus' discoveries had reached them, the Spanish rulers Ferdinand and Isabella enlisted papal support for their claims to the New World in order to inhibit the Portuguese and other possible rival claimants. To accommodate them, the Spanish-born Pope Alexander VI issued bulls, setting up a line of demarcation from pole to pole, north to south boundary lines, going in east-west directions, 100 leagues, about 300 miles west of Cape Verde Islands. Spain was given exclusive rights to all newly discovered and undiscovered lands in the region west of the line, which included the entire North American and South American continents. The treaty later on moved it. Portuguese expeditions were to keep the east of the line. Neither power was to occupy any territory already in the hands of a Christian ruler. So it was only an affront, a doctrine of discovery, against other places that were not under Christian rule. Okay? That's fascism at its core. By use of a doctrine of discovery. And so much like the Hitler's willing executioners of World War II, we have this dogma of this society that's following a civil service line of anarcho-capitalists, libertarianism, which is very close to fascism, using slave wage labor for the advancement of the capitalists, not the men, not those laborers. So let's get into the entire civil service as a review. I don't know what's giving me a delay here.
Like I've told you, with the entire executive service. Please verify somebody that you can see my screen.
Yes.
Thank
you.
you.
Can see it.
Awesome. So when we see the entire executive service, civil service, we're talking about administrative personnel. So even with the executive civil service.
So the administration is at the executive level. Okay? Understand that. It's not the judicial level. It's not the legislative level. It's at the executive level. And it's the equal consideration, equal benefit in the contract of civil service where you execute your will by signing documents as another executive. That's as simple as it gets, folks.
Like I've told you people,
it's an equal consideration, equal benefit of capacities. You're only enslaving yourself. When you learn the contract terms and conditions, you don't have to bow down to that wage slaver or slave wager. You don't have to bet that the employer will pay you and pay you sufficiently so you can live your life. Understand what your talents are and how to evoke them. Go forth with your talents and come back with double. Invest in those. Your talents are by your knowledge. Knowledge of learning how to contract, coining your words or pursing your lips.
Courts are administrative courts only. Period. The only judicial review that will ever be brought about is if you bring that judicial review yourself. No other way.
The judicial system is the value system. And that's the department, judicial officer department is an independent and neutral forum within the United States Postal Service. And you put your value to everything that's posted, or you let it ride. It's just like a craps game. You're betting on shit. It's a gamble. Learn what you're doing and understand what the outcomes are and generate those that are for your benefit.
And it says, subchapter Civil Service Regulations, Accepted Service.
The exception is that you're not part of the administration under civil authority. That lies as a presumption. United States business means a United States citizen. Therefore, if claiming a United States citizen, you are in fact executing business instrumentalities, financial instruments, governmental instrumentalities, official documents, and you're operating in the capacity of another official. It's a presumption. Break the presumption by showing the exception. I am not a United States citizen. I am not a resident for income tax purposes. Specifically, your financial system, your economical system, your commercial system says I am not employed.
It says, consequently enough, the first one is positions of chaplain and chaplain's assistant. Notice, however, in plain writing, these are both capitalized, so they have specific definitions, and therefore we need to qualify those definitions according to 1 U.S.C. 1 by point of clarification, objection, clarification, point of law, whatever it is you need to do to verbalize that this is obviously not the same chaplain I know of, as in reverently, chaplain hyphen teeth, lowercase.
And I make mention of that. That's the first thing that they have in there. And I want everybody to comprehend what's going on here is the fact that if you think there's a separation of church and state, what you're seeing before you is a association of church and state. It is an inconsistency with that very concept. So it's hard for anybody to convince me that there is a separation of church and state regarding Benito Mussolini, supposedly an Italian fascist, granting the Vatican City its sovereignty. How does that work? Wouldn't you think that the Catholic diocese, the Pope and all that, would already hold their sovereignty under God? Why would the papacy need a treaty granting the Vatican City sovereignty? See, I question things, folks. I question them for a reason. I don't see them as being logical. They're fallacies in the very concept. And please point me out if you think I'm wrong.
And it's got reserved. Why it's reserved, I don't know. Maybe we can check that. Maybe there's a place telling us why it's reserved. And then it says C, positions. And I want you people to realize, we're not talking about person yet, are we? We're talking about the position.
We're talking about the office, the entitlement, the title holder of official capacities.
You know, the seat of government, whereupon persons enacted by the people sitting in that seat, to which appointments are made by the president without confirmation by the Senate. Sounds pretty willy-nilly to me. Sounds like he could hire any one of his friends.
Sounds like federal employment or contracting. It happens every day.
Through that appointment, whether they be qualified through a educational system, or even just very knowledgeable. We'll see that later.
Hey, Keith, I hate to interrupt, but can we get everybody to mute out because there's some background stuff?
That better?
Yes.
All right. Positions, and then it mentions attorneys. Now, wait a minute. Is an attorney a position? Think about this, people.
Doesn't this mean that they have the position of attorney available for this section? Is that not what that says?
And remember, this is under the Executive Civil Service. It's not judicial. Not administrative.
Every time somebody signs a document making a transfer of some sort, they are in fact acting in the position of an attorney, even if they're not named in person as an attorney.
Because they're attorney. They're attorneying property, right?
They are in fact in the position of attorney because they are the ones attorneying.
Actions speak louder than words. And if your actions can be presumed to be of a certain capacity to allow the transaction to happen, they might merely check your ID. Oh, yeah, he's got state ID.
The beneficiary is not required to do anything, including accept the grant. A beneficiary doesn't even have to accept the grant.
See, this is where mom and dad's knowledge has to come in, because they're the ones that are supposed to train that child up in the ways of the Lord so he does go out and share his talents. So he does invest in himself as a pass-through of those very talents, the knowledge that he gets. And the more we send our children into these public education schools where they get indoctrinated and propagandized, the more we're harming ourselves and putting more harm possibilities amongst the younger generations. It's doing nothing but getting worse. And I really wish people would wake up and see that.
You say, no, thanks. Give it to somebody else. Next one, very important. Law clerk trainee positions. You guys realize that clerk of the court is in fact a law clerk. Appointments under this paragraph shall be confined to graduates of recognized law schools or persons having equivalent experience. You know, somebody that's really knowledgeable.
This would go for the same thing as attorneys, guys. Understand, those attorneys operate as attorneys at law. Upon age and majority, where a reasonable man can show his discretion, he is attorney in fact. Learn the difference. They're equivalent, but different. That's the exception. I have an equivalent ability to contract, but they're separate. I'm not contracting in official capacity of your defined persons under that legal name that you claim you own with the number. The individual's name is what you own, known as a legal name, that you then turn around and style in various different grammars.
Like I just mentioned, that we would see here. We're seeing here. Or persons having equivalent experience. Now, I've been keeping my own financial records since I was 10 years old and got my first paper route. How's that for clerk experience, bitches? Excuse me. The next one, as we see, this is, and then the next one is H reserved again. And then it goes on into temporary and less than full-time positions. See, those positions is what it's all about. And you're not in the position of a political seat, wherein by an oath of office is required in order to perform the functions of the military provisional government, extending its services by commercial means.
See, those residential districts that you live in are political subdivisions. They are not the industrial district. They are not the downtown district. They're not the school district. They're not the zoning district. They are political subdivisions known as residential districts. Keep claiming resident for income tax purposes at the state level, doing business as a United States citizen, as that resident, born in the United States, but now residing in one of the states. You don't understand what you're babbling if you don't understand those terms.
Not qualified. I'm the beneficiary as the end user of that provisional government, whom they are by obligation and duty required to protect.
That's the
next one
preamble.
is the entry of the records. Remember,
That's the preamble to the Constitution and then the first 10 articles of the Bill of Rights.
we talked about that birth registration and its assignment of a social security number to a newborn child who owes a debt to the United States as a Medicare qualified government employee. Improper entry.
Government instrumentality.
Right from the beginning. Nil, null, void, vacate, nunc pro tunc, ab initio, and impossibility. Entire public record with that name and number is in fact wrong and has caused many wrongs.
Should have never been imported. Not until the age of discretion or age of majority, where one has reasonable discretion to be able to make that choice himself. If it were to his benefit, he could accept. If he determines that it's not to his benefit or not going to benefit him as much as he would like because he could do better, then he doesn't have to accept the conference of a nationality of United States citizenship. Nor can the resident be taken up until it is determined that he is doing it for income tax purposes, which would be for investments in that commercial system. Not for his own gain, but in the commercial system. Again, as a federal employee or contractor of some sort. You do not have to contract with the government.
Any person described in 163.2A with reference to an import transaction.
Import transaction. Not an import good, but an import transaction, a commercial transaction.
Where in the
That's why it says Department of Treasury record keeping.
data elements were imported through the Customs Bureau to establish a financial issuance of a military defense document through the birth registration. Shall be prepared to produce or transmit to Customs in accordance with 163.6 any entry records which may be demanded by Customs.
So the birth certificate is a international customs bond.
Everyone born in every hospital in these states is required to file a customs form out to clarify nationality, whether
Creating that international customs bond, saying, rather than being a prophet unto the nations, so ordinate or so sanctified and ordained by the one that created you or knew you before he created you in the womb. When you were cast forth from your mother's womb, instead of making that memorandum or declaration of nativity, there was a declaration of nationality.
they be alien or immigrant.
Alien nativity, not born in the United States, nor any state of the Union, but born in a state of being a living soul, a very act of God with every breath.
They have to be domestic transactions, which are civilians as executive civil servants, or general. In other words, they apply to everybody until the presumption is broke. That's what the birth registration is. It's a general registration until you break the presumption. You either break the presumption by denying the incorporation or following through with the incorporation of the corporate entity that was established. You either incorporate it or you deny it. One or the other. You cannot serve two masters.
And that's what I'm talking about. When it's already established as a commercial instrument for certain things, and in my presentation so far, it's a matter of transferring that to the right hands. As you see in the comments, Josh Junio said, tell the Port Authority that the American vessel is back. And I said, surrender back to the U.S. in salvage interest. They hold the interest on the obligation. You hold the interest as real party in interest. Greetings, Iman. How you doing tonight, sister?
Synchronicity, great brother. All is well.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. And yes, Josh says again, it's called bottomry. See, in the commercial realm, they have things called liens, and that's what this bottomry is all about, as well as salvation. As long as there is still one plank left, this is what's called walking the plank. Most people don't understand it. When you walk the plank, you measure the plank and you find out how much that piece of wood that is still left is worth. And then you can salvage it and rebuild the entire vessel from that one piece of wood. It's called salvage. And it's a United States vessel. So you surrender it through a reversion and merger of the estate in a new trust name. Surrender. It's the resurrection, resurrection. When you erect something, it's a building. It's the resurrection. It's the uprising. What is a bankruptcy? Think about this stuff, folks.
Hey, brother, write in that word bankruptcy is the word UP, up.
Well, that's what rupture means. It's a bank rupture, like a volcano ruptures and things go up. A bottle ruptures and things go up.
In regards to the record keeping, Under that very same one, 163.2, persons required to maintain records. I don't maintain records for any person but myself. And it is never in all uppercase letters. Not myself. I have a faith-based union in all uppercase letters, but that's a different person. Record keeping not required for certain travelers.
Traveler, non-resident alien. Traveler, non-resident alien.
Having physically cleared the customs facility. That's when you leave that hospital. Physically cleared that customs facility. Not the customs border or the customs agent or the customs facility, which enacted the entry into the customs records. A traveler who made a baggage or oral declaration upon arrival in the United States.
I've never been to the United States. I've never been in the United States. See, the United States, as far as vessels goes, is a special maritime territorial jurisdiction that itself reaches out through a fictional overlay, as if though everybody in that fictional overlay is in the United States. That's not the way it works. That's the record. You are not in the record.
Never occurred. I've never traveled into the United States. I've never been to that 10 square miles of Washington, D.C.
And that's Washington, D.C. Once you get to Washington, D.C., you find the United States, you let me know. It could only be the White House, Library of Congress, the places where they keep the records. Go ahead, sister.
Brother, I was thinking about something. Isn't 28 U.S. Code 3002 I think it's 15 where they talk about the United States as a foreign. Don't they also say it's also an alien? You know what you just said. I just can't think right now. I'm so excited.
28 USC 3002, Section 15. Is United States means a federal corporation, an agency, department, commission, board, or other entity of the United States. That's the citizen. That's the vessel of the United States is known as a citizen that carries on and executes the business as a United States business. An instrumentality of the United States. That's the record. The record itself is the instrumentality of the United States. And greetings. We've got the Fallen with us. How you doing tonight, Fallen?
I'm doing all right.
Good, good. You learning anything? You gonna be able to help us teach something here? Any
Hey, I don't know if I'm going to be able to teach anything, but as in learning, I would agree with that.
Absolutely, I appreciate it then. And in the meantime, feel free to share anything that you think might have pertinence to it, and we'll be glad to learn from you in those.
Okay.
Never seen the corporate entity known as United States in Washington, D.C., where it's supposedly located.
So that doesn't if that includes federal territories supposedly within or their insular possessions, is it possible that you were on an insular possession and been?
And that's all it is territorial possession. If they have.
That's that administrative court system where everything's lodged into that record. County registrar, a position. Administrative Article 1 corporate courts.
Territorial possession that doesn't exist because the birth registration is false through that territorial possession of a state record entered in through a custom facility in that state. How can it be applicable?
I have a question.
And
I know a guy who says,
What's that, brother?
What gives you the right to speak in those I don't want to call them courts, but in those venues? What gives you actually that right that if all of this is like the United States or whatever, then how do you claim your right then to speak into that?
As the beneficiary deemed to be the true owner. Equity law, which is trust law or express trust, equity imputes an intent to fulfill an obligation. Equity deems the beneficiary to be the true owner. So if you own something and you appreciate it, you take on the obligation to keep it and maintain it for good use. That's the obligation, use.
And that would be the difference between private and public?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Third-party benefactor, not subject to the contract to which the obligated party is obligated to myself, known as the obligee.
But what gives you that right?
I don't understand what you're saying. It's not a right, it's an obligation. If you're gonna recognize the trust, you have to understand how it works. And in that, when you understand how those contracts works, you find out your position in that trust. See, there is a trust at play, and it's a military form trust for protections of the beneficiaries. The problem is people don't know how to, don't have the education and haven't learned how to position themselves in the trust by defining certain contract terms that qualify the obligated parties for that benefit. They're gonna get a benefit as obligated parties in this trust. Somebody has to pay them. As the beneficiary being deemed the true owner, that's an acceptance of a position to extend credit because you have no real way of paying them. That's the true trust. It's a credit system.
Okay, that was my question, is that trust in that payment of like what brings that trust into play? It's like, is that the United States in the way that's set up?
Well,
Or
yeah,
how do you?
it's the way all contracts are set up. Equity was merged with common law. Common law is succinctly contracts between men. Equity is the fairness if something goes wrong with those contracts. Now we have a system that has an equitable remedy in commerce. So when things like that happen, somebody can at least get paid some kind of value. Today, that
What?
value system is credit.
Right, that's what I was thinking, is there's no really payment. It would have to be a credit.
Correct. And that's the private side. Through the public side, you have to make payments. That's the public liability and the use of those instrumentalities known as obligations and other securities of the United States. You can create your own security by taking beneficial ownership of the bond they created and indemnifying them with it.
So why would that birth certificate then be that important?
Because, like Dean Phillips says here, so when claiming just compensation, should one require credits on account? Correct. Because otherwise it's money of account. Now you have credits on account. And I'm telling you, they've already got credits established in the system if you worked under employment anywhere and paid in SSI and FICA.
Well, do you believe that that Federal Reserve note is actually credit?
Absolutely. It's a promise to pay. They're all monetary systems operate on a credit system. They can't just see. That's what people don't understand is that they say that they're creating money out of thin air, and they're not. They're creating money based on the amount of credit that's being established through the documentation. Each piece of paper is a bookkeeping item, and they have to get paid for it. So it creates a value for their payment system. In that, their payment system is a mill rate system. In other words, they're using the decimal system to change the numbers, folks. Again, I'm going to explain. A penny times a penny in normal math is 1 penny. 1 times 1 is 1. But if you change that penny in style from 1 penny to 0.01 through the Dewey Decimal System, now if you take 0.01, which represents a penny in the digital form, electronic digital form, it is times 0.01 is 0.0001. It no longer remains 0.01. Is that do you see that? That's what the banks are doing when they take your credit to the bank or to the federal discount window, and they get say you get a loan for $175,000. They go to the bank with that note for $175,000, but they can invest as an asset your note that they claim as their asset now at that drawing window for 10 times the amount.
So that's not actually payment. Anytime you say payment, you can just insert credit because they want
Yes,
credit for it, not payment, but they want credit.
correct. It's a debt system which allows you to advance credits through informed use of credit, which should return to you. Equal consideration, equal benefit. So if you're using credit in a buy and sell purchase situation, equal consideration says if I give you 50 credits, you owe me 50 credits. It's no longer dollar for dollar. It's credits.
So do you
See, that's
believe
what
that's why the gold standard was stopped?
Absolutely.
so
They no
isn't that
longer
where they talk about money being the medium of exchange? That's where the exchange comes in with the promissory notes, where they exchange
the blank piece of paper that you can
the
write up your
paper,
own terms on.
right, for your credit, exactly.
Yep.
And I'm not the one that imported that right.
And excuse me, welcome, Mitchell. Good to see you up here tonight, brother.
Hey, thanks, man.
Anytime, anytime. Be sure to pipe up if you hear anything.
Record to the United States. The state is. The state is the importer of the record. They exported it from the United States because they imported it from the county. So now
See how they're all playing exporter, importer on both sides?
the
Yeah,
state
I can
and
see
the
that.
United States.
Say again?
I can see that, brother. And this is what it also says as you're talking about that. It's not giving me a code, but it says a permanent resident, also known as a green card holder, is a person who has been granted the right to live and work in a country permanently, but is not a citizen of that country. The status is usually granted to individuals who have been admitted to the country as immigrants or have been granted asylum.
Right. And the intent was to work in the United States. Oops.
Yeah, I have a question because how is the country, how did they distinguish between country and corporation?
That's that sovereignty setup. Okay. Understand that the Vatican, before it got its quote grant of sovereign state from a fascist Mussolini, um, they were the corporate center, the commercial center of the world since they built on top of St. Peter's Basilica. They have been the commercial center of the world since. Don't ever be fooled. There's no separation of church and state, and the state is the one enforcing commercial codes around the world. And they're the ones enforcing the monetary system.
But you could say that that was the church doing that also, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. What is Italy known for? Mobsters? You think they might be a little fascist?
Are importers. They're the ones that are holding the records.
Remember, we talked about that game of confidence last night, right? So what we have is a Vatican papacy that's playing a game of confidence in a capacity that you would never think of unless you actually did your research and looked into this shit. Doctrine of Discovery back in 1493, after Columbus discovered the Americas in 1492, supposedly, and Portugal wanted a bite of it, so they had to create a treaty. It wasn't until 1929 that the Vatican even had any recognition of a sovereign state. This is what Washington, D.C. is trying to do. That's
So,
why we see all this fascist bullshit going on.
so a treaty is a contract?
Absolutely. That's all it is. But it's a recognized contract on the international level through a trust. Remember, it's posted in the International Public Forum. That's a global postal trust service. The Postal Service handles everything. Go ahead, sister.
I don't know if you can hear me. I think it kicked me out.
No, you're here.
Oh, okay. That's the reason I can't think of it right now on the top of my head, but that's the reason why the Constitution states that you have to utilize not only the Constitution, the treaties, as well as the United States laws. You have to use all three in conjunction because that is the whole part of the meat and the potato for the contract. Where the Constitution is. You get your utilization of your privileges and your and correct me if I'm right, if I'm wrong, Keith, where you get your privileges and your
Immunities.
immunities, right?
See, that goes right along with the transfer of the title. Expenses. Oops, now she dropped. Expenses incidental to transfer of title to the agency. Expenses incidental to transfer of title to the United States. Expenses incidental to transfer of title to the United States Postal Service. Postal Service and the United States are the ones that deal with the treaties, while the states are the ones that ceded their jurisdiction as administrative contractors. So again, you're talking the same thing, and it's about correlating the same language throughout those three jurisdictions. And this is the law is construed to be uniform throughout all jurisdictions.
So how did they how did they hire, let's just say, competent um, residents?
They didn't. See, that's the problem. Under 19 U.S.C. 81O, it says that no person shall reside within the zone except, that's another exception. I'm not a federal, state, or municipal officer or agent. That's the exception to the entire civil service. I'm not a resident. No person shall reside within the zone except federal, state, or municipal officers or agents whose resident presence is deemed necessary. Can't be volunteered, and it must be done already. Is deemed necessary by the board. The board being the Secretary of Commerce as the executive chair and Secretary of Treasury. It's a commercial position.
What's your definition of the zone?
The zoning improvement plan. It's a foreign trade zone under the zoning improvement plan. So you have the Postal Service under the Global Postal Trust Services that has all of these territories of the Union. These territories are the 193 nations. Those nations each have a trade zone under that Global Postal Trust Services for all the postings made in all of the trade zones. Each of those nations can then subcontract that trade zone and grant trade zones to internal entities, which in this case, the United States, known as 50 states ceding to the jurisdiction of the United States, or however many states, are those internal units that are then granted foreign trade zones themselves. Then the counties are granted trade zones, and then each municipality has a trade zone or several. They're all known by zip codes.
So how does that correlate to military?
The military is through the post. It's either a army post, a fleet post, or a diplomatic post. So if you're not in the army or on an army base, then you're not dealing with an army post. So if you're on a residential street, however, you're dealing with a fleet post office. The same thing with a car. You're buying a car, that's a fleet vehicle. That's a military term.
I think that's what's hard for me in my limited mental capacity is trying to separate that military to the, as you say, the postal United Postal Service as having
Yeah,
the
you can't.
jurisdiction.
Yeah, you can't. See, the post office is an inland marine installation staffed by postal service workers. They're
Yeah,
inland
they
marine
haven't,
installations. That's what's
but they
carrying
haven't.
that's what's
Right,
carrying the maritime law inland. See,
but they
the
okay.
admiral on the land appoints the captain to the vessel.
But they haven't hired a competent resident for that position.
Correct. They haven't appointed a competent captain of a United States vessel. Exactly.
And
That's the
that's where
United.
our problems come from. Basically, it
Yep.
all stems from that right there.
Yep. A misidentification.
That were
And
exported from somewhere
what are
else.
the small percentage of people that are born presumably in that 10 square miles?
Still, it has to be an incorporated entity. And so it's still
Yeah, see, it's not born in that 10 square miles. Again, the United States is located in Washington, D.C. So where in Washington, D.C. is the United States located? Because I want to see where I was born in. Because I don't think it extends to the hospital way over here.
has to be at the
And again, in that fictional overlay, it does, because that's a military hospital.
So
age of
Keith, would
majority.
that be
Go ahead.
okay? Question that I have. Would that be a particular port? It would have to be a specific port in Washington? Would that be,
No, it's
would,
it's
would it?
imported. It's imported through the Chamber of Commerce and the Postal Service. Everywhere it goes, that's a foreign zone. So it exported from one zone and got imported into another zone.
So would that import station be the postal? It will be the post at the post office, right?
Yep.
Okay, okay.
Think about it. They're the international money changers. That's a customs issue. Those are customs offices. And like I said earlier, they talked about that declaration. Nobody's making the proper declaration, so it's going through customs without being clarified right.
How is a bank not a that currency adjuster? What you just said.
They are. They are. But they're still under the Postal Service. See, the Postal Service is the one with the real estate investment trust. That's why they hold the global postal trust services. It is a
Uh,
global postal monopoly and not a money monopoly, not a bank monopoly.
I have a question. This may be a little off topic, but there was Alexander Spooner or something that tried to do his own mail service. What was the problem that they had with him and why they shut him down?
You mean Lysander Spooner? That was back in the
Yes.
day. That was back in the day, and he was a man that is after I think highly of him. He's one of my favorites. And he spoke about the people standing up for their rights in this kind of stuff. And that's why they shut him down. There weren't enough people that thought like he did. So he didn't get the support to prove that this is how the system's supposed to work. If you have the right, the ultimate right of contracting, then that means you have the ultimate right of putting the terms and conditions in those contracts to which those terms are posted. That's your unlimited power of posting. People aren't understanding that. It
Is
goes
that why
hand in,
we have a
it goes it goes hand in
is
hand with your ultimate power of contracting.
but ultimately is that why we have a problem today?
Yes, people still don't understand it.
But they get shut down. It's just like in that aspect of what he did, they just like rolled right over it.
Yep. That's why, I've got a homemade stamp that I received from somebody shortly after I returned back to Waterloo. But while I was out in New Hampshire, I was using them myself, but they went to other people. And so when I got back to Waterloo, I saved the one that I managed to save because I lost everything out in New Hampshire when I come off the mountain. But the one I have isn't my stamp, it's somebody else's. And it's definitive evidence, material fact evidence that it does work. But I can't get the local post office or postmaster to comprehend it like I was able to out there in New Hampshire. He understood it. It took a couple weeks, but he understood it. He understood that stamps themselves are money, and it doesn't matter who makes them.
Is that why they put a tax on stamps?
Taxes are duly paid by stamp. Stamps show that the taxes are prepaid.
Because then, Keith, isn't the stamp considered a representative value?
Yep. And the represented value is prepaid. Look at this account number.
Is that from the numeration at birth?
Yep.
You either accept the incorporation or you deny it and conduct your affairs privately. See, the acceptance of that incorporation is an alien investment. Alien investment. Because if you accept that incorporation, you can invest in the United States corporation and you have to have a hold harmless indemnity agreement. That sounds.
That's the immunity. That's the indemnification I've been talking about. And I put this out 2-3 years ago, guys. This is what I've been building on. You are an exception to the entire civil service. And any document they give you already comes with hold harmless and indemnity. Go.
But you're indemnified to it if you don't become that employee, correct?
Correct. Once you take on the obligation of that employment situation, now you are held liable because you're operating in a public official capacity, the performance of the functions of public office, simply known as trade or business.
So Keith, then the resident would be the alien, and then the individual would be the record, and they're attached together.
The
Is that
alien,
correct?
right, the alien is considered a resident inappropriately, and it is
And the rec
attached to a record that is enumerated. The individual's name and number identify the record. It never
Okay, make
identifies you.
yeah, that's what I thought. It makes sense. Thank you.
Yep.
It's like internationally protected person. And there's already one in place. Why are they not following it? So let's get on to the next one.
See, if you have a United States vessel and you really want to take care of it and you send it out into the international venue, don't you already have an obligation to protect that vessel? I mean, you're the one that created it, right? See, it's already
What's the
there.
vessel mean? What vessel?
That's the United States citizen. It's the paperwork that moves that citizen through commerce. Every time you
But
sign a document,
that was done at the enumeration of birth. You didn't create that vessel. It was created for you, right?
correct, and it's their creation. And if they created it, they control it. However, again, if they created it, they also have the obligation to protect it. That's
So
implied.
Keith, so Keith,
So
so
instead
is
of
that where they
protecting it,
is
Go
so
ahead,
is
sister.
that where they interchange the word vessel and vehicle? Because 1 minute in
Yep,
transportation it's considered a vehicle, and then when they're talking about instrumentality, now it's a vessel,
yep.
like a ship.
Contracts. Commerce means traffic, transportation, or trade. Now, when we see
Okay.
trade, we think about trade or business. It's all commerce. It's all a commercial monetary system, and that's what they're talking about. Dang it, my mouse is screwing up. Hold on, guys.
well, that's okay.
The
I'm
law,
just trying to figure out if you're considered the vessel, then how can
No,
your
no,
vehicle
no,
be considered?
no, no. You are not considered the vessel. The documentation is the vessel. Do not ever imply that they are presuming you are the vessel. Many of these people do not know this information. They're just doing their job. They could care less whether you define it as a vessel versus them defining it as a piece of paper. They don't understand these concepts. They're just doing their job. They've never been trained in this stuff. This is
So the vessel is the paperwork, the spirit is
the
you.
vassal. Yep. See, your flesh and blood body is a vassal, VASSAL, and its captain is your spirit. The paperwork is a vessel of the United States, and its captain is the person. So if you coin your words through your spirituality, that person will be a good boy. Many people are not taught this, so they don't understand it, and they just sign documents. They don't understand that that's a vessel that should operate the same way you operate your vassal, with your own intent in mind to benefit you. And again, that's another
That's how
piece
they
of
get
thing that people are swayed.
right, but that's how they get misconstrued in some way
Right.
because people, when they decide to be a person, then they react in ways that they react instead of separating the to you.
Correct. And like I said, it can be a benefit, but again, it should be up to one's choice and only upon a good knowing and willful intent of being able to do such a thing appropriately.
Be required to
And then
maintain
having
supporting records regarding non-commercial.
Say that again.
No, I was just saying that's where the I guess the struggle would be is because you can be that way or knowing that, but if there isn't an, let's say, employee on the corporate side not recognizing it, it's like there's the struggle right there, right?
Right, right. Yep, and that's what we're going through that's why we're having to do all this research because we're finding it such a struggle to get anybody to comprehend. You got to do more than your job. There's something greater. There's a greater truth here, and you've been trained to do this stuff. And I'm telling you, you're doing it wrong. I'm not trying to do that to specifically be critical and mean or anything. I'm telling you, I know you might think you're doing good. But by just doing your job and not taking into the moral status of things, you are laying down false laws that are hurting your brothers and sisters. And it's all a presumption.
And you know, Keith, that comes in line with the scripture. I'm telling you, everything is just lining up today. It comes with the scripture. Faith without works is dead. If you're not putting in the work and you're not putting in the work and you're not learning and relearning, you know, taking off that old veil off your brain and putting on a new one, hey.
Yeah, and if you're not
See,
doing it in faith, and if you're not doing it
right.
in faith to be careful to maintain good works, that's the fallacy. See, even if you do have faith, it comes down to making sure that you're careful to maintain that they're good.
I think that faith is like the basis. It doesn't matter what you think good works is. If your faith is off, your good works are off.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Commercial merchandise acquired abroad outside of their territorial jurisdictions. See, if I acquire things not in person and not by using the position of the person, and I acquire them in private, do they have any jurisdiction? Anyway.
Non-commercial merchandise acquired abroad. What is the term abroad as it relates to outside of the United States rather than in the United States? Okay? So we have to understand the ambiguous language made here as it regarding non-commercial, because if you purchase something for an intended use that is non-commercial, then it is not commercial. So it's non-commercial.
May I, Keith?
And oh,
Go ahead.
So when you're saying, because it kind of draws a question back in my head, because I remember family always used to tell family, you're growing abroad. And you know, that was at one time, that's what they're saying when you're moving from a particular landmass from one area to another. So what that means, you going abroad would be going outside of our boundaries of the United States. But if you stay within, you're within that boundary. So now you have returned back.
Yep.
You're not aboard anymore.
Yep.
Oh,
Aboard and abroad. You got it right. Remember that last plank. It's aboard.
see, that's what I was wondering too. Is like if I did something for commercial use and then somebody like purchased it for non-commercial, it's like in that contract of understanding of having to be subjugated to, well, no, it's commercial because I sold it as commercial, where you may have wanted to buy it as non-commercial.
Right. And that's why we're talking about the exception. You have to place the exception. I accept the birth certificate for its surety, except that there's an exception to the entire civil service that does not apply, or that applies. There's an exception to the entire civil service that applies, and this document proves it. See, it was created as an instrumentality of the government as a United States citizen, a United States business. And
As a civil servant.
right, exactly. In the state, however, they recorded it as a resident, which is a civil servant, federal, state, or municipal officer or agent residing within a foreign trade zone. I'm not foreign. You are. The government is. The people are natural, and the government is foreign to our natural state of being. That's the state I live in.
Because the government would be a figment of the imagination.
Correct.
No.
There is evidence that there is governance, but government itself, as we know it, doesn't exist. You're absolutely right. It's a fiction. The act of governance, however, is true and real.
It was not recorded, and I am not required to maintain supporting records for them, because I didn't do it in support of them. Period. Very plain language. Acquired abroad, which falls within the traveler's personal exemptions, which is covered by a flat rate of duty.
Mill rate. A mill rate of duty. And again, duty is a military term. Go ahead, sister.
So when you go to the post office, when they're asking you to, if you want a flat rate, is that what they're asking you indirectly, and we don't really know that's what they're truly asking you?
Yep. When you go back and study stamps, you will find out there are some Panama Canal stamps and some others that actually put on their mill rate, so that you bought a 5-cent stamp for 2 cents because it was a mill rate. It was a change of currency rate. Again, they're international monetary exchangers. They can exchange one rate for another. That's what the Federal Reserve's doing. That's a floating note rate.
Okay. Is that where the 2-cent stamp came in, and you can utilize that to send mail at a particular weight?
Not necessarily, but that's the way it's used. Again, you've got 2 and 3 cent stamps, and one is without the United States and one is with the United States. Guess which one's going to cost you more?
I have a question. Is that stamp rate, it's fixed? Whereas if I went to an individual and needed labor or something, I could then contract their wages or that stamp rate that they would charge. Let's say they wanted 300. I said, man, I'll give you 250. In that aspect, they have the competency and the level to exchange that rate themselves, to go, well, the book reads is 300, but I'll do it for 250. Where if I went into post office and said, I want a 75-cent stamp, they're more likely not to give it to me for 50 cents.
Right. But go to a coin shop. They're going to do the same thing. See, that's the thing. Something that has real value can't be had dollar for dollar, because you got to give a man his ability to make a little, so that silver coin that's worth $27.75 by weight, he wants to make a little bit, then he's probably going to sell it to you for a price that he can make a profit. So if he bought it at $32, he's probably going to hang on to it, see if it'll go up more, so he can make a profit. If he bought it at $23, he's probably going to be pretty glad to sell you for today's rate, $27.75.
So you could take that the same as your labor or
Yep.
your IP.
Yep. Absolutely.
So
You get to put
whereas,
your value to your labor. As a laborer doing roof, I might give him a lower value. As a laborer for mechanic work, I might give him a little bit more because, or raise that wage a little bit more because I've got a little bit more experience at auto mechanics and engines and stuff than I do at roofing. See what I'm saying? So the value fluctuates depending on your talent.
They are the contracting members. The contract is already in place. They already imported and exported. Those are the contracts they are involved in, and they are the ones that did so unconscionably.
Unconscionably. Because if it's a departmental regulation applicable to the Department of Defense, again, you can't just import people into your record as military officers and agents as if though it already applies by enumeration at birth, and then indoctrinate them into a
but they,
military educational program so they don't know any better.
but that's what they do, correct? As employees.
Absolutely. They don't know they were indoctrinated, so they're going to send their children to the schools. They're going to have their children in those hospitals without making the declaration, the customs declaration, because they don't know none of this. Go ahead, sister. Oops, we lost her. All right, well, we'll continue on. She'll come back.
Without letting anybody know that upon the age of 18, it is very important that everybody understand and comprehend that if they do not incorporate this established corporation and invest in the United States corporation, they must deny it and create their own trust. No other way about it. It's the only way you can partake of that public trust is by becoming a contractor to it. Invest.
And the denial here is the capacity, again, the position of being able to have the capacity to be a, quote, chaplain in their administration, executive administration, an attorney in their executive administration, a clerk in their executive administration, and an employee in their there's an exception. It does not apply.
Substantial.
The next one,
And
data
the,
elements that we talked.
We lost you, sister.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, so that's where I'm thinking about the substantial and the procedural unconscionability. To me, that's where the conflict would come in between the rights and the obligation, between how one would operate in that sense.
Correct. See, we're all told
Okay.
that we got to get a driver's license, we got to have a job, we got to get a social security number to employ it all. Then we got to get a bank account to save our money and everything and invest in everything. And none of it's true.
We've been told to be the obligor.
Yep.
About, and I'm going to run this real briefly because, again, here it tells us the importer of the record foreign trade zone, social security number, or CBP agent assigned number of the entity liable for the payment. They assign the number, and they are liable as
They assigned a number to an entity, and it is the entity that is liable. Understand the wording there. Or Customs and Border Protection assigns number of the entity liable for payment of all duties. It's the entity that's liable for payment of all duties and responsible for meeting all statutory and regulatory requirements incurred as a result of importation. It's their entity.
That's the tough one for me because it's like, so then when I sign, do I just print all capital letters
No, no,
as
I
being the entity that they assigned all of that for? Because like they try to get
wi-
you to signature your thing to a capital letter entity.
without recourse, without prejudice, by benefactor, restricted endorsement. That's expressing the trust in your executive capacity in order to execute the documentation in the correct status of the trust. You're the third party benefactor of which the obligated party is obligated to.
The importer for the person, and the person is the one that carries the liability. And when you sign in UCC 3-412, or I believe it's, I'll pull that up again, but it says the authorized representative giving an unambiguous authorized signature is not liable for the person.
So the unambiguous authorized signature is a restricted signature, qualifying that capacity as benefactor, reserving your rights.
So
See,
keep
that's
that
my
restricted.
question. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Go on, and then I'll go after you.
I was just my thinking is that and all that unrestricted stuff is like, why wouldn't I just sign in capital letters, because then that doesn't hold me as responsible as to,
No, you can't sign in all capital letters, can you?
well, I mean, I have the ability to, right? I mean,
But
my brain and my hand will
I'm,
do it.
I'm telling you, grammar is specific, and when you sign by benefactor, there is no mistaking that you are a third party to which they are obligated in trust of their public service. That's as simple as it gets. This is why I urge everybody to learn trust law.
So Keith, basically what I'm thinking, what the misunderstanding is coming in, when you have the uppercase letters, it would be considered Roman alphabet. And
Dog
so
Latin.
those would be yeah, and it's utilized when they use it in upper and lowercase, that would be the dog Latin. But when it's all Roman uppercase letters, that would be this the sign language, because those are the letters they use for creating signs. And all the lowercase letters, all lowercase, would be what they utilize for the English written form of writing documents. Am I
Yep,
correct?
correct. And that's why I say it's about the different grammar styles. You got the upper and lower case of English. You've got the all uppercase of English. You'd be surprised to know that Latin was all uppercase and didn't used to be lowercase. Now we see that Latin they're using in lowercase, and English never used to have all upper or uppercase letters at all when it was first created. It was only because of different authors wanting to enunciate the first letter of their letter or whatever they were authoring, and then later on it went to each paragraph was capitalized, and now we have the capitalization of each sentence and the capitalization of specifically defined words, terms, and conditions. It's a morphing language, and it's an adoption of multiple different languages that changes constantly. Look at it today. We have transgenders. We have multiple pronouns of he, they, them. No, 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 no. Those aren't genders. Those are pronouns, but they're not genders.
How does that change the signature?
You're qualifying the signature with a restricted endorsement, without recourse, without prejudice, by benefactor, and then sign it.
Uppercase and lowercase?
Yeah. Your normal signature, you're just going to restrict the endorsement by letting them know there's an exception to the contract. I'm not in the contract. I am party to it as the obligee to which you, that is in the contract, as a matter of public trust, is obligated to. Because you're the trustee. I'm the beneficiary. You have to give to me now.
So
See, I
Keith,
already
would that
gave.
make so that would the beneficiary be the obligee or the benefactor?
See what?
Would the obligee be the beneficiary or the benefactor?
Both. They're obligated both
Okay.
to you and the record.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Person or on the instrument for the person named in the instrument. Again, reaffirming that the person, the entity, is liable for the payments of duties. Not me. The person named in the instrument, that all caps name, and it belongs to them. They're the ones that created that corporation, and we can either incorporate it or dismiss it. We can be the beneficiary of that, or we can say, no thanks, I'm going to take benefit of what's already there. Free.
And when we say no thanks, it's a matter of, again, correcting that record so that those credits can be reverted and merged, and merge the estate into the new trust.
See, I
Those
don't mean to beat a dead horse, but just in that saying, we can either disagree to it, but how can we not disagree to it and sign the all caps?
Again, it's a matter of not disagreeing to it, but its capacity. You still get beneficial use because it's in your name. Inherent real party and interest. Nobody else can perfect that title. Tom Sawyer cannot perfect the title of Huckleberry Finn. They're two different names. The only one that can perfect the title in which the name is entitled is the one that the name came from. When the
The
legal title,
enumeration at birth.
the legal title, yep, when the legal title merges with equitable title, the trust is collapsed. Come in as the benefactor who can control and settle the matters in transferring the title to the proper party so that the credits can be reverted and merged to the estate in a new trust.
I'm not going to invest under a risk management insurance scheme. I don't need insurance. And again, these numbers, or these name, the name and number identify the record, and a widely recognized commercially accepted identification number for this party may be provided in lieu of the name and address.
And remember,
First of all,
we did our insanity clips the other night, and we saw the guy in there that was giving a driver's license number in lieu of his name and address, and they didn't like that too much. See, they don't understand that. She insisted that he needed to give them his name and other birth date information. Not required. Go ahead, sister.
I remember something you said maybe a couple of recordings ago. You mentioned something about C.O.W.A.R.D.S, how that was the new, and how I guess you would use it interchangeable with your given name. Can you explain that to me so it kind of makes sense?
C.O.W.A.R.D.S is my pen name that I created. That is my name. Keith Little is the legal name that the United States created. That is their name. Mom and dad called me Keith. That's the given name. They gave me a second name, Orland. Those are their names that they called me. I allowed them to call me because it was just natural. When it comes to the Keith Little and C.O.W.A.R.D.S, Now I can write under El-Hotep II Pero, just like Samuel Clemens did. Mark Twain. That's all it is. It's a pen name, which I can go forth and start making my authorship known and published. And it's already known as fiction, second person, hearsay.
The record is only pertaining to the name and
So-
number, then where does the address come in?
Can't be held liable if it's hearsay, right? Go ahead.
Well, that was my question is like, where does, okay, you answered it with you can't be held liable if it's hearsay. Thank you.
Yep.
The address comes in because we've been indoctrinated to get.
And so the legal name is hearsay, right? You understand now? It doesn't require a signature at all. In fact, you can just tell
Well,
them.
Right. That name that you said the government created for you, that was actually the name that your parents created for you, and then they
Nope,
created
nope,
that corporate fiction,
nope,
right?
nope, 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 nope. What the legal name does is it mixes the family name with the given name. I was never given the family name. It exists as a legacy. That's the true entitlement in earth already, is the legacy. That has nothing to do with the material evidence of a material estate, which is the inheritance.
So your whatever you just said that name was that you made as hearsay, then how does that play as the legacy?
Because it goes to the origin of a surname. The surname in this material world, we have things like John Smith that came about because people knew him as John, but he didn't have any last name or anything else antecedent to any last names. This is Jesus of Nazareth is the same thing as John the Smithy became John Smith. And then the Smithy son became John Smithson. See, they in the beginnings they started carrying different last names according to different positions and stuff. Then they just started making it simple and just said everyone's got the last name, and you just hold it. Does that
So
make sense?
what makes the right? What makes the name that you made for yourself, the name that you said, what makes that hearsay?
The name I made for myself is a pen name known as secondhand for specifically writing.
So that allows you to do work in someone other than who you truly are?
Right. It allows me to take my observances and put them out to the world as hearsay so I can get opinions back rather than making blatant claims or accusations where I would be criticized. It's just a more peaceful way of writing.
Right. Or held liable, I think,
Correct.
in that way, like you were saying.
Exactly.
I get it.
You can't hold Mark Twain liable for Samuel Clemens or Tom Sawyer, can you?
Correct.
Give the name and address instead of recognizing that the name and number identify the record, and we only need to give the number. So all indoctrination does not follow what is plain and true. 19 U.S.C. 81N, operation of trade zone as a public utility. They are utilizing your actions, your securitization of signatures on documents that aren't qualified. They're using that through the cost of custom service. You're paying for those duties that they're supposed to be paying for.
Taxes are duly paid by stamp. And then, of course, we've been convinced again to pay taxes in many other ways by Federal Reserve notes, money orders, checks, things like that.
And why?
I
Because
got
you're a
it.
resident of the zone.
Say what?
I was just like, that's so fantastic. I mean, just a revelation came into my brain. And maybe it's because I'm slow, but that's just like the ultimate disclaimer. It's like
Exactly.
Mark Twain can't be held responsible for anything. So you can put anything you want out and it can never come back as liable to you as the corporate fiction, basically, right?
Correct. If anybody's held liable, it will be Mark Twain, and that is the corporate fiction, not me.
Well, how can you be a resident of the zone? No person shall be allowed to reside within the zone except federal, state, or municipal officers or agents whose residence presence is deemed necessary by the board. Board which is established to carry out the provisions of this chapter. To carry out means to enforce the provisions. Who is the enforcement of the provisional law? The military. It's the Board of Commissions, the Military Board of Commissions. Yep. Customs, operated through the naval forces. And you have the Coast Guard, which guards the coast, and you have the Marines that secure all of the inland boundaries through post offices known as inland marine substations that operate in interstate commerce, transportation. And there you have your marine insurance, inland marine insurance, and transportation Interstate Commerce Act enacted through motor vehicle insurance by indoctrinated residents that are serving two masters under dual citizenship of being a resident and a United States citizen, when in fact they are neither.
I have a
Keith,
question.
the confusion that I
Go
have
ahead.
is, thank you. So the legal name, is that the hearsay, or is it the
Yes.
the calling that you call yourself now is the hearsay? Because I thought,
They're both hearsay.
okay.
The given name is true and correct, but I do not own it. It is not mine. It was given to me as a calling.
So in that
Form
other name that you call
I-26.
yourself, that would be that same thing. Because that was my question. It's like, which one's the hearsay? It's like, I'm just going to say this is Keith, the hearsay, or is
No,
the other name that you made yourself the hearsay, as going, neither one of them can be held responsible.
no. The given name is fact. The given name is fact.
Only
When it's
because it's on the record, right?
no. The given name is fact. The given name attached to the surname or family name, which they translate as a first and last name known as a legal name, is hearsay. Keith Little is hearsay, but the given name, Keith, is a fact. It is given to people all of the time.
Six, immigrant petition by alien investor. Everything the U.S. does in regards to those foreign trade zones.
Instead of being a foreign grant of the federal government, it's my grant. Informed
Do
use of
you
credit.
can,
I'm the one that's granting things here. I assure you. Grant in etymological terms means assurance. I don't need insurance. I assure you. That is surety ship, and I hate it. I am sure. Go ahead.
so do you consider yourself an alien investor?
Absolutely. I was invested into the United States. That's an investment. and I'm foreign to it. I'm alien to it. It is
Is it
alien
because
to
you're
me.
not an employee?
Correct.
Is a grant of a foreign trade zone to the states that ceded to the jurisdiction of the United States. That's why they grant them a trade zone. The states grant a trade zone or sell an internal trade zone to the counties, and they in turn do the same thing for the municipalities. Federal, state, or municipal officers or agents thereof. Those are the only people permitted to reside in the zone. Reside. And you, I'm my grant. No, I'm his grant. Yep. I'm my own grant. I give my own authority.
So what's that tell you about the county officials and agents? If they're
I
not a
know it.
federal, if they're not a federal, state, or municipal officer or agent, what about the county? See, that's where all the records are kept. See, the county is the executive side of the administration. That's why it's the county's district court that oversees all of the local municipal attorneys.
That's what's frustrating for me because somewhere in me it's like, no, I'm my own daddy, but if I don't understand all of this, then I can't be. You know
No,
what I
no.
mean?
Yeah, that's what makes it hard to comprehend, but that's technically not what it is. But again, that's why I keep trying to remind people if the people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, then the true benefit is the knowledge. So take upon the benefit and see how much it tenfolds over for you. I assure you.
I
So
wish to
Keith, the
invest in your
question,
grant.
Go ahead.
the question that I have about the county, so then that would be the we have the as above, so below. For the United States, that would be the president. And then for the state, that would be the governor. And for the county, that would be the mayor.
No, the municipality is the mayor, and the county is a commission.
Oh, okay.
Commission with a board of directors. County is the corporate state.
That have no authority. It's all fraud. I wouldn't recommend filling that out. This is just information I come across in my research.
And I've gotten away from calling it fraud anymore because it's just fraud in the inducement, maybe, if you could prove it. But again, it goes to that thing, forgive them for they know not what they do.
It's
I'm putting
ignorance,
out there.
right?
Right, right. A want for knowledge.
All these links I'll post. List of individuals with lawfully present status for eligibility and enrollment purposes in the exchange individual market. That's what your alien investor is.
And remember, I talked to you about the blue sky securities laws, exchange trades, and they're just mimicking the federal SEC trades. It's an exchange individual market, and it's based on the individual. The individual's name and number identify the record, and everybody puts that down as an address under a postal trust.
Why do you think they, oh, sorry. Why do you think they mimic that?
Because it's a way to convert private assets into public assets and then present them to the United States for an award known as a grant of equal consideration to give them equal value in return. So when you pay in to SSI, the Social Security Administration makes a deposit into the trust fund and the federal government matches it, equal consideration.
So
It's
Keith, is
it's
that
called
where they
it's
consider the
it's called equitable sharing program.
so is that what they're talking about, the trade? When you have the trade zone and the people are bringing in their goods and their wares, they're trying to get a prize. They're trying to win prizes.
As contractors, yes, they're bringing in products into the zone, and they're doing so as a legal entity. They're given the legal name with an address. The name and number identify the record. That's a postal address under the Postal State or Postal Services Real Estate Investment Trust. You're considered a postal contractor, a contract postal unit, and you're posting in all of their records. You're giving them the data elements in error. You're not giving them the correct data elements. Restricted endorsement. Without recourse, without prejudice, by Benefactor, and then sign it. Learn how to express that trust and know all the contracts before you do that, because they're going to test you on your knowledge.
An exchange individual market. All you're doing is transferring property of persons. And you do it by your signatures. That's all it's required is a signature, and you get transfer personal property in their system. Me, I grant anything that was given to me under his grant to anybody else because I recognize that. In their grant, they're saying you can't grant this any further. That they're saying you the purpose of buying this car from this.
And that's why I do all this for free, guys. All this information came to me free. Granted, I've got a PayPal link and I do ask for donations, but I don't charge. I don't. You want a private session? I'm going to do a private session whether you want to give me a donation or not. If you ask me how much I want for a donation, I'm going to tell you we'll do the session first, and then you decide whether you want to donate or not and what you want to donate. It's not up to me. My duty is to share the information freely.
What makes their duty want to test you when you said do that and be ready because they'll test you on it?
Because they don't want somebody putting forth instruments that might cause them a problem. They want to know that you know how to handle these instruments so that you can put them forth in good faith.
And
How is not putting them... Oh.
And that's why it made sense what you said, Keith. Now I think of immigrant, I, me, grant.
Yep.
I'm the grantor.
And in equity, again, it goes to the trust, and again, it goes to the contract. Equity imputes an intent to fulfill an obligation. So when it comes to this record and stuff, like I said, we've been doing things wrong, even though we didn't know it. Once we learn it, then we can correct it. We can start correcting the instruments we put out by restricting that signature knowingly. And then when they test you, you're going to be able to pass that test. That's why I say don't try this stuff without doing your research. Don't believe me. Don't believe the neighbor. Don't believe the government. And for crying out loud, don't believe your mother. Do the research. I can explain it to you, but I cannot comprehend it for you.
Right. So how could not placing them forward not be automatically taken as being in good faith? That they would have to trust you, that if you actually started placing them forward, how could they even think that it wouldn't be in good faith?
Well, because again, they forgive them for they know not what they do. So when you do something that they're not used to, like placing that special endorsement, that restricted, they're going to sit there and I've had them tell me several times, you can't do that. The fuck I can't. Here's why.
That's why everything that we're experiencing is a test. We're having a test through the Most High to see who can show themselves approved.
Yep. Study to shew thyself worthy and approved, so that you may rightly divide the word of truth.
You have to really comprehend what those exchange individual markets are. If you don't, I wouldn't recommend using them. Adjustment of status. Adjustment of status to that of person. See, your status was that of a live being, a living soul. As soon as you were born, and God gave you the breath of life in your nostrils, and man became a living soul, they changed that status through this paperwork to that of a person for admittance for permanent residence. And at 18, when you don't take upon that permanent residence by incorporation through the correct process of taking an oath so that you can then perform the functions of public office, which is interstate commerce, all commercial transactions, all commercial items, enacting the statutes and federal executive orders, then you ain't got nothing. This is what they're using against you. Quit it. There are so many elements
So
that you have to fulfill in order for any of this to apply.
so they purposely falsified the record.
No, they did not understand what they were doing. I'm telling you, these people do not do the research. My mother worked for Social Security Administration for 29 years. I guarantee you she never read the Social Security Act. My dad was a real estate appraiser for the tax assessor all of his life for the government. I guarantee you, he doesn't know the first thing about how that property tax works. Because if he did, he would understand he's not running a business out of his own fucking home, then he's not required to pay taxes. It's not a commercial place. However, when you claim resident, you are claiming it as a principal place of business.
Eligibility. General, any alien who is physically present in the United States. You guys realize that's an impossibility.
I don't have to read any further, guys. You show me anybody that is physically present in the United States, and I'll call you a liar.
They're in a bureau. They're in a bureau.
Bureau of Vital Statistics.
You realize
United States Census Bureau.
you can never physically be in the United States. Never. No way in hell can you physically be in the United States. And saying goes, you can never physically be in the state of Iowa. You can't. They create these impossibilities in, on, and for the public record in plain writing. What is the United States? 31 CFR 3002, 15A. The United States is not a government. It is a federal corporation.
And I misquoted that. We spoke about that earlier. I said 31 CFR 3002. I don't know what the hell I was thinking back then, but it's 28 USC 3002 section 15, and it tells you all those different entities.
Right. So now, Keith, I see why they want you, not you literally, but the you to be able to be the debtor to the United States or owing a debt to the United States. Now I see it clearly.
Right. And when we read that code, it says under the definition of you folks, on 20 CFR 422.104, I think it is. I'm not sure that. I might be a little wrong there. But you is defined as an individual who owes a debt to the United States. So we already know that the individual was in fact created by and through the state. Okay, it's a creation of the state under a government instrumentality of the United States. So it's like a co-creation, right? In that creation, the individual who owes a debt to the United States is the state agency that created it in good faith of the United States, upholding their obligation or other security of a United States vessel through the territorial special maritime territorial jurisdiction. That's
Right.
That's those foreign trade zones inland through the Postal Service.
It's like being a resident causes you to be an employee of the public trust, which causes you to owe a debt to that public trust, which is the corporation.
Correct.
Exists on paper only, people. Ineligible aliens. Eligibility. Aliens and nationality. Executive office or immigration review. Before you can be an alien investor, you must go through an immigration review. Department of Justice.
And this is for permanent residents. And again, is deemed necessary by the board. That resident determination is for federal, state, or municipal officers or agents. This is still for a contract. This is talking about eligibility to be in contract with the federal government. Not investing, but as a contractor, a trustee.
Ineligible aliens. The following categories of aliens are ineligible to apply for adjustment for status to that of lawful permanent resident alien under Section 245 of the Act. Any non-preference alien who is seeking or engaging in gainful employment in the United States who is not the beneficiary of a valid individual or blanket labor certification.
So we have, like I was talking about earlier in the stream, an anarcho capitalist society taking upon a blanket labor certification. This is your minimum wages and shit. This is your rate of duty. Okay? Your pay rate, your per diem, your pay per day, a military labor system.
I have a question.
Issued by the Secretary of Labor or who is not exempt from certification requirements under 12.8b of this chapter. The birth
Selective service. Go ahead.
Well, my question is when you were talking about, let's say, the silver coin, and this person puts an amount on it so that he can make profit. So how is that exempt from what you're reading right here?
Because you can do, I can trade you a hammer for whatever you decide you want to give me in exchange for the hammer, so long as I believe what you give me is of equivalent value of the hammer that I'm giving you. And I'm the one placing the value on the hammer. You have to place the value on what you want to give to me, and we have to come to terms that is an equal value and not accordance to a dollar for dollar scale. See, if you needed a hammer and I decided, well, I've got two hammers, I can give him a hammer. And you decide, well, in exchange, I want to give you, say a $10 hammer by normal standard value, but I've used it, so it's a used hammer. It really doesn't have a whole lot of value left to it because, in fact, I still have that other hammer, right? So I give you that hammer, and you decide me out of kindness in equal consideration to just go ahead and give me a bushel of grapes or something. What's the dollar value? There isn't any. That's an extrinsic value outside of our private agreement in exchange. That's why they got rid of the gold clause, so we could enforce our private right of contract through negotiations. Now we can negotiate privately, orally, between us without having to write a piece of paper out. That's all it takes.
But the gold standard allowed that anyway, because, I mean, unless you went by what they claimed that ounce of gold was worth, and then you just stuck by it.
And that's what they did. They claimed that the ounce of gold, 0.9999 fine gold by the Swiss standard, is $1. That's a weight and measure of gold, not of a bushel of grapes or a hammer. See, the weight doesn't matter anymore, does it?
Right. I mean, it's the same as like that the devaluation of, let's say, the promissory note is going, well, it was worth this much when I worked for it, but now inflation makes it worth like 75% that much.
Exactly. I'll gladly pay you 2 hamburgers on Tuesday for a hamburger today. That's
So
a
if you,
futures market. That's a futures market where you get to defer a debt to a certain date in the future.
Right. So if you did the hammer deal and you gave me a hammer because it was used and you didn't need it, how does that keep then the corporation to go, hey, you just received unearned income?
Because it's not an investment. An exchange is not an investment. An investment is where you have money, which is known as collateral, that you can give to somebody else to establish a commercial environment and make money off of it. And then you get a return on his ability to make a profit. If he doesn't have an ability to make a profit, you lose your collateral. I give you a hammer. I give you a hammer today, and you decide that you're going to give me a bushel of grapes, but grapes aren't on harvest time yet. Doctrine of ripeness. I can give you the hammer today in our oral agreement, and in that agreement, you are now contracted to give me a bushel of grapes when harvest time comes. That's not the deferment of a debt. It's an obligation and contract already.
Right. Whether or not that bushel of grapes ends up costing me more than the hammer ever would have, my obligation is still to provide that no matter the cost.
Correct.
So Keith, the question that I have, and tell and guide me through this. So I'm a child and I want sweets, because I have a sweet tooth, right? So I go down the hill to the gentleman down the street that has a store, and I don't have any funds. And so I said, well, my dad said I can come to the store and I can get my sweets. So my dad says to me, well, when you go there, he'll give you the sweets, but you put my name on the paper that I'll come in and pay on this specific date. So that's the futures date you're talking about,
Yep.
that the payment is going to, okay, makes sense now. I get it. I get it.
Yep. That's what those tabs at those stores are. It's a deferment of debt.
Registration
And so
allows the
those,
certification of life.
oh, so those futures then can be invested.
Correct. They're all negotiable instruments. And if you don't restrict the endorsement, somebody else, as holder in due course, can use that monetary instrument in an investment. It's now his property. You sold all rights, titles, and interest to the property, which is the bond in your name.
So that's why you would sign that, what you said that I keep forgetting it, but
Yeah,
or
yeah,
with
without
restriction.
recourse, without recourse, without prejudice, by benefactor.
Now, Keith, the
Of course.
question that I have is, when you utilize 3-402, that's where they're saying the man or the woman is not responsible for the signature in the document, where that's where the signature is on the document, right?
Right. And you've got to make it unambiguous. Means you have
Right.
to restrict it.
Okay, so then when you utilize 1-308, which is without recourse or without prejudice, does that also a protection for yourself when you use that particular code as well?
It protects the process of the transfer, so it's not held against you as a liability. Whatever
So
they take
question
out has to come back.
Okay, so the question that I have, say for instance, I get into a situation and they say, well, the only way we can give you anything, you have to put your name on this paper. But I not knowing, and because my brain is doing it, my brain is thinking, my hand just going through the motion. I go and I put a signature, but right after that, I put 1-308 ARR, all rights reserved, and then without recourse. So then that protects everything that's went out is to be returned. Is that correct?
Correct. In other words, what they're going to do is they're not going to hold it against you. They're going to take it from the liable party, which is the record. So if they deem anything's owed, which the record will show it's not, because you're the true creditor, it'll go right out. They'll process the payment.
That's
So
what's tricky to
basically, in
me.
that
Oh,
sense, so basically, in that sense, when you go to court and they say to you, I'm the plaintiff, I'm bringing the charge or I'm bringing the claim, they're really trying to receive a benefit from you. And they make you the defendant because you're the creditor through the A or 40 form. And basically, they're wanting you to give them that benefit with you relinquishing your rights unknowingly. Is that correct?
Correct. That's why I say, and I can't say that they do it on purpose, but I do know that's how the system works, those instruments, and that's their job. They do know that.
So that you can call up the state or contact the state in a communicative way and say, hey, I want a birth certificate. And they'll send you one. Certification requirement of Section 212. Certification requirement. How can you certify that which is false?
And that birth certificate, like I said again, it encompasses so many different capacities. Here we're talking about the labor institution because that's what you're required to have in order to go get a job. Right? Everybody says you have to have a social security number to go get a job, right? In fact, you don't.
Exactly, because it's voluntary. So basically, what they're having you do, like in the Bible, I forget the name of the two brothers. I think it was either Cain and Abel or Joshua and Esau, where one brother had the brother to give up his birthright in order to receive. So that's what they're doing when you go to these employment organizations. They're saying, give me that number, give me that name, which is identify the name in the record. And then basically what is happening, you're giving up your birthright, not knowing, because you're putting that signature down, and that's where everything gets securitized. Because once the signature is on paper, you don't qualify that signature. Basically, they securitize that everything. That's your assets that they take and they convert to the obligor in the back, those assets in the back that you know nothing about, they don't tell you anything about. So basically, you think you're getting a benefit from employment, you're really laboring and you're paying yourself basically.
Yep, absolutely.
And an impossibility. You cannot certify anyone to be physically present in the United States. Can't be done. Therefore,
Again, if you can find the United States for me, please tell me. Because that map they told us in taught us about in school, that's not true.
Well, none of the maps are true because all they do is put up a sign. The sign might say Ohio, the sign might say Indiana, it might say Timbuktu, it might say
Well,
Africa,
well,
and just like it says United States on the sign, you never find that on the ground anywhere.
yeah,
I have a question.
that United States map is just an overlay, that fictional overlay I was telling you about. It's the territorial jurisdiction. That's it. Go ahead.
My question is what was just being explained about in that signing those papers and those documents is that you end up paying yourself. Then how can you not like get yourself paid by voluntary work?
Because the instrumentality is being used against you. If you don't sign it properly, the system itself takes it as it is, and it's running a certain way as if though you're a liable party. So as a liability, you're required to go get a license, social security card, a job, and all that stuff to enforce those documents as a trustee. And if you enforce those documents as a trustee and do something wrong, you hold the liability. How can you possibly do that if you don't know how to operate those instrumentalities properly?
So Keith, is a job a junior officer on board?
I have no idea.
Okay,
A
well,
job,
the
a job as we know it. We're not talking about job. I should say employment.
well, yeah, employment. I understand that too, but I thought I read that somewhere because it's a military term. I remember reading that too.
Well,
But
in
just
employment, think about it, folks. Employment or deployment.
military, because that's what they do when they send you off to war. You're deployed to go off to war, right?
Yeah,
And then
you
you
want to
come
work for
back
the.
and then
You
when you
want.
come when you return, they employ you.
Yeah, you want to work at home or you want to go abroad. Either way, you're working for the military, boys. And now we got a bunch of women doing it too.
Is that why
Any
they say
certification.
between the north? Is that's why they say between the north and the south? When you come north, you're a Yankee. When you go back south, you're a Southerner.
Is false. Fix the language. I got about 10 minutes and I've got a lot more screens to go. So we'll probably be opening another one. Be prepared, folks. When this one shuts down, I'll just reopen another Zoom. It will not be the same Zoom unless somebody can tell me how to reopen the same Zoom real quick. Anyway, we're going to go on to the next one. Please do so in chat if you know how. Aliens not required to obtain labor certification. Certification requirement we just read. Aliens not required. How do you express that you're an alien? Well, that person you claim in your courts has never been incorporated, proving that is not viable. And therefore, I must, by reason and logic, be alien. Because I can't possibly be physically present in the United States. I must be alien to the United States because the United States is a fiction. It can only.
You understand that, folks? I have to be alien to the United States because the United States is a fiction.
It is, and you know what? The fiction is part of it, Keith. That overlay is the flag that they put over the landmass and say that's the United States. That's the fiction, the flag, that overlay.
Yep, the patronymical state. There is but one Father, which art in heaven.
Only exist within me. I cannot exist within it. Period. Continuous unlawful residence since 1982, and this is what we're doing when we file that SS5, when we do the driver's license, and we register our children for school and go get a job, whether it be at McDonald's or for the United States government, either one. It's all putting information on the record as though we're a lawful resident of one of those zones, when in fact we are not, because we have never taken an oath of a federal, state, or municipal officer or agent. Not once. And can't. Period. The alien must establish that he entered the United States.
So that's how a person could be in the United States.
You are.
The documentation only.
And so, brother, I'm not trying to be facetious, but I love my oats. And I eat them honey oats and all.
You entered the United States? Yep, the fuck you did. So anyway, before January 1st, 1982, and that he has resided continuously in the United States in an unlawful status. How can you be residing in the state and in the United States?
Because it's
My
all a
pose is
state
that
of
the
mind,
record
brother. It's all a state of
identified
mind.
by the name and address
Yep.
was entered improperly, and no one, in fact, resides anywhere. According to your code, that is an impossibility. And either through reason and logic, you will admit that, or through your insanity, dismiss it as if, though, I'm wrong. Read it. Get English majors in here and have them read it. You're only competent in the law. And what is that law? The twisting of the words. And the twisting of the words, folks, really only happens in your mind as well, just like the United States, because this is plain writing. This is plain writing. Again, if anybody finds me wrong, please point it out to me, because I don't want to be the babbling idiot how you're looking like a dumbass idiot. But I think this is plain reason and logic. You have to reside within the United States physically, and I find that physically impossible. Ask a doctor. So they're incompetent in the English language if they say yeah, and therefore if they're incompetent in the English language, how the fuck can they how the hell can they competently read the medical scriptures that they're abiding? Are they twisted? Are they not written in English? Is there some kind of magical spelling there? I mean, I really question these things, people. Authority to apply for asylum. Any alien who is physically present in the United States. Again, irrespective of such alien status. Irrespective of such alien status. So again, it's not us that needs to be corrected. It's the record. It's the status. And they're the ones that have it wrong. That status don't even apply to me. I don't know what status is. All I know is I fear not, for I have been redeemed, and he has called me by thy name. I am his. I saw nothing. May apply for asylum in accordance with this section or where applicable, section 1225B of this title. 1225A or 1225 is inspection by immigration officers.
And like you said, Brother Keith, one needs to clarify which doctor, because it could be the doc for the dockyard on Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, or it could be a doctor that's wearing a white coat. Which one?
I have a question on that aspect. Is like, if you're employed by any corporation, how does that keep you from not being in the United States?
Because it seems to be all imaginary. It would be an impossibility.
I'm sorry. You're not. You're actually claiming to be part of the United States if you use a state ID to get that corporate job. This is why I say they can't be requiring you to show ID. If the police can't require you to show ID unless they have probable cause of a crime, what does that tell you?
That you're secure in your person, places, or in effects or something? I'm not sure. What does
No,
that mean?
if the police cannot require you to ID unless you committed or they have probable cause with reasonable articulable suspicion that you have committed a crime, are in the commission of a crime, or will commit a crime. Why is it that an employer can require you to ID?
Well, I'm not sure, Keith,
Paul,
but I don't feel that. I think that
Think.
just like employers, they're indoctrinated. They feel that you need an ID, where just
No.
like with the police.
it's
Think.
policy.
Trading
Well,
with the Enemy
you
Act.
don't.
Trading with
That's
the
right.
Enemy Act. You have to ID some way or another so they can feel confident that they, in good faith, that they are conducting an equal exchange with you. You can use private credentials, folks. You don't need state ID. You don't need to contract with the state. And when you go get a job at a McDonald's, you don't have to contract with the IRS. You do not have to give them a Social Security number. You can file a W-9 and just say exempt. It's the only thing you mark on that form. Exempt. Sign it. Benefactor, by benefactor, without prejudice, without recourse, by benefactor, exempt.
Now, Keith, the question that I have that you mentioned, when you say that, can't you just self-identify because you already know who
That's
you are
the
within
private.
yourself?
That's the private credentials. If
Okay,
you
okay.
if you identify by the state's legal name, that is not self-identifying. That is a state identity saying you're a state employee or contractor. Private credentials is the self-identification. I've got a couple cards in my pocket expressing a trust, and I am a card holder, and it's got a trustee and a grantee, and I'm the card holder. I'm the benefactor of that trust. That's a private credential. doesn't even have my name on it. You can call these guys and they will vouch for me. 2 or 3 witnesses. Private credential.
Aliens treated as applicants for admission. That's that birth registration when mom filled out the application. And we'll be back with the rest of this after our break. Right now, I'm going to relieve this screen and check out comments to see if there's...
And so, folks, we come to the end of this tonight's stream. Like I said, there's a 3-part series. So I'll be coming back tomorrow with the 2nd part. And then Sunday night, I'll do the 3rd part. And so please take your notes and stuff. Like I said, this is an exception to the entire civil service. And it's a matter of establishing a diplomatic course. You're diplomatic, you're a traveler, not a resident. You have the ability upon receiving a diploma to go about the world and be diplomatic. This is setting about your diplomatic course by knowledge. You don't go somewhere you don't know without first trying to learn about it. And then a gentleman always announces his presence. That's an invitation, not a passport. A visa. Diplomatic ambassador on visa at my pleasure, touring a foreign nation. Anything on the way out, guys?
Yeah, Keith, I have a quick question. And the question that I have, when these young men and women go from, the elementary to the junior high to the high school, and then they go through this commencement, the rite of passage is the diploma that they're giving. That's the diplomacy that they're giving for the rite of passage, right? Now, I cannot remember right off the top of my head. I'm probably going to have to research it the next day or so. When you move the tassel from one side to the other, I can't remember exactly what it is. I'm going to have to research it, but I'm thinking that's the rite of passage, letting you know you have earned, if you got knowledge, because you're being indoctrinated. So the graduation or when you get that diploma should be the rite of passage into your manhood, so you can be able to get
Right, but
your passage, correct?
Right, but the term commencement, again, that's a military term, and it's a commencement after you've been educated how to read and write and spell your name and sign it on documents, official documents for commercial purposes. You have now just been commenced the commencement is that of the Battle of the Forms. You're now able to enter into the adult world of contracts and get into the Battle of the Forms. That is a military commencement.
Right. That was my.
Okay, so basically, spiritually it's a rite of passage, but through the corporation, it's now putting you to where now you're not realizing they're giving you rite of passage to do contract, and you're unknowing of it.
Right, and this is done through the General Education Provisions Act. I did a video on that a few years back as well, and that again, understand it says general. That's a military term that encompasses the general population, and it's provisional, meaning it's provided by the military government. It's an education. It's actually indoctrination. It doesn't teach you anything but to remember how to do this, this, and this, so you can fill out and sign those forms.
Right. That's what I was thinking. That right.
I'm gonna say the last thing I'm gonna say, Keith, is that I think you and I are gonna speak it to the rooftop for the Most High and for the world to hear. And I yield. Love you, brother.
Yep, you can't stop me. You can't stop me. Go ahead, brother. Last words.
No, I was thinking of that rite of passage. It's like in that rite of passage, and what you're saying is about the battle of the contracts, because that rite of passage doesn't isn't really an accurate term as to anytime you go before somebody and there's a contract there, you don't have the right of passage until you can pass through that contract.
Correct.
So it's like if I went to a business and I bought something and they gave me a receipt and I went to return those goods because I didn't need them, that on that receipt, they weren't liable in some way to give me what I gave them in return for them unless I provided a state ID. And
Correct.
then to me, like, why do I have to give a state ID? Here's the
Well,
receipt right here.
right.
But
And that receipt, guys, again, it's military. And in the Lieber Code, Article 38 says, so long as he has not fled, as long as the loan owner has not fled, the commanding officer shall cause receipts to be issued that may serve the spoliated owner indemnity. So when they ask for that ID and then they give you a receipt, that's a cash item, but the cash item says U.S. debit. That's a cash item receipt that the commanding officer caused to be issued that can serve you spoliated owner as the indemnity. That's the connection. Accept it. That's the immunity.
right, but I couldn't do anything as in receive back what I provided them and give their goods back until that state ID was provided or I was just out.
Well, right, but that's what I'm saying. That receipt says that you're a spoliated owner. You are owed something. The receipt itself is a cash item under Article 38 of the Lieber Code, which is private property. And it's in your private holdings as you hold it. It's in your possession. And it's a cash item with bonding information on there showing that there's underlying bond. And you are holder in due course with a right to enforce it. So if you have a receipt under commanding officer shall cause receipts to be issued, the spoliated owner may use them to obtain indemnity. It's
Right.
evidence.
But
It's evidence that you are owed indemnification.
right, but on the back, it's like a contract. It was written, you shall not receive your goods back unless you provide this ID. It was like a contract written on the back of the receipt claiming, you ain't getting your money back unless you provide this state ID as a disclaimer of what you're saying about the receipt being a cash instrument.
Right, but it was caused to be issued by a commanding officer. So it holds indemnity. I don't care what you use to give it to them, whether it be a state ID or private credentials. They caused a receipt to be issued that may serve the spoliated owner indemnity. That's evidence that indemnification is owed. Period.
Okay.
All right. You bet. Anytime. And you guys know me. I love you, but I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back. And I'm going to get better at this, guys, folks. I keep forgetting some things at the beginning, and so I still had my Paul Jr. symbol up there. My apologies. But you know me. I love you, but I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back. And that's say, I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you don't respect me. That's on you. So may God bless you. And Snafu and your strike team, I see you couldn't strike me tonight, and you're not going to strike me. I'm not monetized. I show my research, and it's all copywritten with disclaimers. I don't know if any of this is true. This is all hearsay. Don't you see the name El Perro? Have a good night, guys.